The night was dressed up like a fairy tale, all sparkling chandeliers and polished champagne flutes. 100 voices buzzed with congratulations as my sister stood center stage, basking in the glow of a future they said she'd earned.
But my seat?
They pointed me to the public table, shoved back against a cold marble column, surrounded by strangers picking at stale rolls. My brother-in-law's grin was a blade. Only important guests sit with the family. My name is Rachel, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been reminded you were disposable, right in front of the people who should have protected you? I tried to laugh it off, swallowing the burn in my chest, but then I saw the empty place setting. Everyone else had a plate, a glass, a name card. Not me. My sister, resplendent in her white dress, glanced over with a shrug that cut deeper than any knife. Guess you're not that important. Something inside me shattered. I'd spent years cheering her on, helping with applications, driving her to interviews, patching up her self-doubt with my own dreams. And now, she couldn't spare me a plate. The band started to play. Laughter sparkled around the tables like poison-laced confetti. I felt myself shrinking, suffocating.
No.
Not tonight. I stood, smoothing the hem of my dress, my heartbeat like war drums. Reached for the tiny gift bag I'd brought, a vintage bracelet I'd saved for months to buy, a piece of our grandmother's memory, meant for her. I clutched it so tight my knuckles went white. Then I stepped forward, loud enough for everyone to hear, voice steady as a blade. Then I'm leaving. The music stuttered, a record scratch across the perfect scene. Glasses paused mid-toast. My sister's mouth fell open, a tremor flashing across her carefully curated smile. I watched her freeze, the moment hanging between us like a noose. And for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize for taking up space. I turned, gift in hand, and walked out of their perfect celebration, leaving their cold, fragile version of family behind me. Because I would rather stand alone than beg to belong. The night air outside bit through my thin dress, but it felt cleaner than anything inside that hall of hollow applause. I clutched the velvet gift bag, breathing like I'd just clawed my way out of a cage. Behind me, the doors swung shut, swallowing the violin music, the empty chatter, the smug faces who had decided I wasn't worthy of a plate. I kept walking. My heels echoed across the pavement like a war cry, each step a promise that I would not crawl for scraps of love ever again. I reached the parking lot, tears threatening to spill, but I forced them back.
No.
Not tonight. There would be no tears for people who left me hungry at their celebration. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message from my sister. Where did you go? You're embarrassing me. My laugh felt jagged, almost savage. Embarrassing you? I typed back. You made sure I wasn't even fed. Enjoy your night. No reply came. I stared at that gift bag, the vintage bracelet I'd once imagined she'd wear on her wedding day, something from our grandmother's heart. The only thing in that place that still held any love. My fingers curled tight around it, like a lifeline. Then headlights swept across me. A sleek black sedan rolled up, window sliding down. My cousin Mark, who'd seen the whole disaster from the corner of the family table, leaned out. Rachel, he called, eyes soft. Get in? You shouldn't walk away from them alone. I hesitated, but his face was kind, honest. I slid into the passenger seat, air warm against my frozen skin. He didn't ask me what happened, he'd seen enough. He just drove, calm and quiet, letting the city lights blur past like a mercy. You okay? He finally asked. I met his eyes, breathing steady now. Yeah, I answered, voice flat but clean. I'm done with begging to belong. He nodded, respect gleaming where pity might have been. We pulled away from their glittering, shallow party, leaving behind the table where they'd decided I was unworthy. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had chosen myself. Like I had saved something sacred they could never steal again. Mark drove with steady hands, the soft hum of the engine filling the silence like a blanket. The city rolled past, neon lights flickering against rain-washed asphalt, painting the world in bruised colors. I held that tiny gift bag in my lap, the weight of it somehow heavier than anything I'd ever carried. My grandmother's bracelet, all the memory, the love, the hope, they'd left it to me to protect. And now I wondered how I'd ever thought to hand it to a sister who couldn't spare me a plate. Mark's voice broke through my thoughts, low and calm. "Where do you want to go?" I swallowed, a lump rising in my throat. "Home." He nodded without question. As the car curved through side streets, I stared out the window, replaying every look, every smug laugh, every cold shrug of my sister's shoulders. "Guess you're not that important." Those words sliced through me even now. I squeezed my fists, nails digging crescents into my palms, refusing to cry. "Not tonight." When we pulled up to my apartment, Mark parked and turned to me. "You know," he said, his tone almost gentle, "you don't deserve the way they treat you." I looked at him, something hot and angry flashing in my chest. "They've treated me like this since we were kids," I admitted. "Like a spare part. Like background noise." He frowned. "Then maybe it's time they learn you're not background anymore." The words landed like a match on dry kindling. I nodded, slow, feeling a spark catch fire inside me. I climbed out, the night air biting my cheeks, but I felt invincible somehow, raw, sure, unstoppable. Inside my apartment, I set the bracelet down on my dresser. I stood over it, breathing, letting its quiet beauty remind me who I was before they taught me to shrink. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Can you come back?" My sister's name glared at me from the screen. I read it calm. Then I placed my phone face down, refusing to answer. Because for once, she could sit in her discomfort. For once, she could wonder where I'd gone, what she'd broken, what she'd lost. And I would let her wait. The sun rose sharp the next morning, slicing through my blinds, catching on the bracelet like a spotlight. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone buzzing every few minutes with new messages. "Come back, Rachel. Don't make this about you. You ruined everything." I read them in silence, my face carved from stone. Make this about me? They had made sure there was nothing for me at all. No seat, no plate, no place. I let the phone buzz until it went quiet, battery dying the way their excuses always would. A knock on my apartment door startled me, breaking through the heavy hush. I opened it to find Mark again, holding 2 paper coffee cups. His smile was warm, human. "You sleep?" he asked. "Barely," I confessed. He held out the coffee, like a peace offering. "Then let's go fix that." I took the cup, letting the bitter warmth steady my shaking hands. Mark leaned against the doorframe, studying me. "They're never going to change, you know," he said quietly. "People like that only learn when you stop letting them hurt you." I closed my eyes, letting his words settle. "Then I'll stop," I said, surprising myself with how calm it sounded. He nodded.
Good.
"You deserve to take up space." We left the apartment, walking down quiet streets, the city just beginning to wake. Every step felt like peeling away an old scab, raw but healing. I thought about the bracelet, about how it was supposed to be hers.
No.
It was ours, from a grandmother who had taught me love didn't come with conditions. I decided then I'd keep it, a promise to my younger self that I was worthy of something precious, something untarnished by their cruelty. Mark dropped me back later, squeezing my shoulder before he left. "Call me if they bother you," he said. "Family or not, you don't have to take their poison." I nodded, grateful, tears stinging but refusing to fall. Because I was done being their doormat. They had invited me to their table just to humiliate me, and now I would never sit at their table again. They could choke on their own pride, for all I cared. Because this was the first day I chose myself, and I would never let them take that from me again. Days passed, each one carving away a little more of the ache until only something stronger remained. I went back to work, back to living, letting the routine stitch me together. No calls from them. No more desperate messages. Silence. It was almost peaceful. I wore the bracelet one morning, letting its weight remind me who I was, who I had always been, someone who showed up, even when no one saved her a seat. That afternoon, I stepped out for coffee, sunlight catching in the gold links on my wrist. The cafe was buzzing, tables packed, and I waited in line with an ease I'd never known before. Then a voice behind me, too familiar, too sharp. Rachel. I turned slowly. My sister stood there, her graduation sash draped over her shoulder like a trophy. But the shine was gone from her face, replaced by something tight and desperate. "I've been trying to reach you," she said, brittle as glass. I raised a brow. "I saw." She fidgeted, eyes darting around as if searching for sympathy. "Look, that night, it wasn't personal. There just wasn't space." I felt something in me laugh, dark and clean. "No space," I echoed. "At your family table." Her mouth opened, shut, then opened again. "You're making this dramatic," she snapped. I stared at her, calm as a knife. "You left me hungry on purpose. You made sure I knew where I ranked." Silence. For a heartbeat, the cafe felt so quiet, like the whole city was listening. Her shoulders sagged. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she whispered. I took a slow sip of my coffee, heat blooming through my chest. "You didn't think I'd ever leave. That's the problem." She reached for my hand, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I am." I looked down at her perfectly manicured nails, remembering every time she let me sit in the corner of her life, and felt nothing. "You can be sorry," I said gently, "but I'm not coming back." Her breath hitched, eyes wide, like a child losing a toy. Then I turned, walked away from her and her paper-thin apology, the bracelet on my wrist shining under the sun like armor. Because this was no longer her story. It was mine. The city felt brand new as I stepped back into the afternoon light, my sister's voice fading behind me like a bad dream. The sun seemed brighter, the air sharper, as if the universe was rewarding me for finally standing up. I walked with purpose, each footstep a refusal to ever again beg for a seat at a table that had no place for me. When I reached my apartment, I found Mark waiting by the door. One look at my face, and he read the entire story. "She found you," he guessed. I nodded, sliding the key into the lock. "She tried to pull me back," I said. He tilted his head. "And?" I smiled, a blade of hard-won calm. I walked away. His grin split across his face, pride shining clear. "Good," he murmured. "About damn time." Inside, I set the coffee down and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For a second, I barely recognized the woman staring back, chin lifted, eyes bright, heartbreak turned to steel. Mark stepped up behind me, quiet. "You know," he said, "you don't have to keep carrying their shame." "I'm not," I replied, voice ringing sure. "It's theirs now." He nodded, satisfied, then pulled something from his pocket. An envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Your share of Grandma's estate," he said. "I found out she meant for you to have it. They kept it from you." My heart thudded, rage and wonder tangling together. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. A trust fund, enough to start a new life, hidden away from me all these years. My sister had known. My brother-in-law had known. They'd left me scrambling, scraping by, while they hoarded this final gift. I felt the last thread of loyalty snap. "This is mine," I said, gripping the paper. "All yours," Mark confirmed. "She'd want you to use it. To live." I looked around my apartment, small and worn but mine, and felt a strange, defiant joy bloom in my chest. I could leave. I could build something new, somewhere no one would dare tell me I wasn't enough. I closed my eyes, breathing it in. Freedom. The kind that no one could steal again. That night, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the numbers almost too big to process. A trust fund, invested and preserved, waiting for me all these years. While they fed me scraps, made me believe I was less, reminded me I didn't deserve a plate. Mark sat opposite, calm, letting me take it all in. "They knew," I whispered, rage building like a tide inside my chest. "They knew, and they still humiliated me." He nodded, steady. "They can't touch it now." I looked down at my hands, trembling, remembering every time I'd counted coins for bus fare, every time I'd gone without just so my sister could shine. Not anymore. I reached for my phone, scrolled past the unread messages from my sister, and dialed the lawyer's number instead. Set up a transfer, I told him. I'm moving. His voice was brisk and professional. Where to, Ms. Rachel? I closed my eyes, saw wide skies, quiet streets, a place no one knew me by the damage they'd done. Somewhere new, I answered. A fresh start. Mark smiled across the table, proud. You're really doing it. I nodded, a strange, reckless joy lighting me up inside. I'm done begging for their scraps. He raised his glass of water like a toast. To not begging. We clinked our glasses together, the moment small but powerful. That night, as I packed a single suitcase, I placed the bracelet in a soft velvet pouch. It would come with me, a reminder of a woman, my grandmother, who had loved me without conditions. The rest? I left behind. No sister's photos, no pity-lace mementos, no half-hearted apologies. I left her with exactly what she had offered me that night. Nothing. As I zipped my bag shut, the world felt wide, endless, and finally mine. Because if they wouldn't make space for me, I'd make my own table, with enough seats for every dream they tried to crush. And I would never, ever let them pull me back into their poison again. The morning I left, dawn cracked open like a promise, pale gold light spilling across my bare apartment walls. I stood there one last time, suitcase in hand, breathing in the silence, a silence that felt like peace instead of punishment. My phone buzzed again, one last desperate text from my sister. You can't just walk away. We're family. Family. The word rang hollow, like a cheap bell.
I didn't reply.
Instead, I slipped my grandmother's bracelet around my wrist, letting its quiet weight remind me that love didn't have to come dressed in cruelty. Mark was waiting by the curb, engine idling, ready to drive me to the airport. He stepped out as I locked the door behind me, eyes shining with something fierce and proud. You sure? He asked. I nodded. For the first time in my life, I'm sure. We loaded my bag in the trunk, and I glanced back just once, at the building where I'd learned how to survive, how to stand alone, how to rise. No tears. No regrets. Just freedom. On the highway, the city blurred behind me. Every mile felt like a clean page, a chance to rewrite my story far from their cheap applause and empty seats. Mark glanced over, voice warm. Wherever you land, he said, they'll never break you again. I smiled, a slow, unshakable smile. No, I agreed. They won't, because I would build a home where no one had to beg for space, where no one went hungry for love, where I could finally take a full breath without feeling unworthy. When the plane took off, I watched the ground fall away, felt the pull in my chest. Not fear this time, but something close to hope. I closed my eyes, letting the sun touch my face through the window. They had left me starving, but I had learned to feed myself. And this time, I would never let them take another bite out of me.